Ladies and gentlemen, I am so excited for this session. This is session 4, the people of God. This session is my jam, okay? So it's gonna be less teachy, more preachy for 2 reasons. Number 1, I love talking about this subject. Number 2, they turned off the air conditioning in my church like 3 hours ago. I'm boiling lava hot. The sun is setting, making it pretty on the pews, but also making me 1,000 degrees. So we're gonna go through this, and it's gonna be awesome. Here we go. The role of the laity. That's what I want to talk about today, because last week we talked about the role of the clergy, especially the Pope and the bishops in union with the Pope, as the successors to Peter and the apostles. Their job is to safeguard the deposit of faith, to engage in what we call the ecclesial ministry, so that the lay people can believe and be made disciples of Jesus Christ, observing all that he taught us. Okay, and we knew that St. Peter was given the keys to the kingdom, that the gates of hell would have prevailed against Peter and his church if he was just left on his own. Because immediately the church started falling into all these divisions. And Paul and all the apostles exercising their authority, constantly keeping the church, this big ark of God, trying to keep it stable and aimed in the right direction, following the North Star that is Christ, navigating the high seas of this world. I'm going to see how far I can push this analogy, right? Steering the church into safe harbor, right? So our goal, our job, our role as lay people, what is it? It's to not pretend we're priests or pseudo-priests or quasi-priests or diet priests, just 1 calorie, not priest enough, okay? The role of the laity is to be salt and light in the world. Our vocation is what's called the secular vocation. We are not the ecclesial ministers of the church. We might have some aspects of the liturgical ministry that we can participate in that before Vatican II we couldn't have done, but that does not mean that you and I, that our main role, if we're really super devout and we're really in love with our faith, is to become Eucharistic ministers, sacristans, and lectors. All of that is well and good, but that's the role of the clergy. They're the ordinary ministers. We're the extraordinary. We're the exception, okay? And that matters. I want to tell you why that matters. Because when Vatican II came out, all these people got so excited about the quote-unquote changes the council was ushering in. And this is what enraged me, because the actual documents of Vatican II, if you read Lumen Gentium and its decree on, or its conversation on the laity, and then if you read a whole document called the Decree on the Apostolate, or the workings, or the mission of the laity, these 2 documents, so important in the church, it is as if no one read them. And for most people, the role of the laity is just to become quasi-priests. See, in fact, the church has a role. See, here I am in my big, beautiful church. I love this church. I love the stained glass windows and all this good stuff. My role as a layperson is not this place. I come here to be fed, to be forgiven, to be nourished by word and sacrament. But when I leave here and go home, that's where my ministry, my apostolate occurs. Mother Teresa said, if you want to change the world, go home and love your family. Mother Teresa probably said that, right? Maybe I said that. I'm just going to say Mother Teresa said that. But to go home and love your family, the domestic church is where I reign as priest, prophet, and king. And yet, so many Catholics walk out into the world, find it cold, realize they don't share our values. We do a big U-turn and we come back into the church. And we use the softening in Vatican II, or what followed Vatican II, yes, lay people can be lectors, girls can be altar servers, all this different stuff. And it opened the doors for that. And once it opened the doors for that, all of a sudden, all these lay people became clericalized, which is not our role. It's not our nature. It's not our role. We are not ordained. Deacons, priests, bishops, that's their role in the church. Our role is, once we are sanctified, to go out into the world and be Christ to those who don't know Christ. To go out and to be salt and light in our jobs. To be the best and holiest people we can be. Our mission is, in Latin, ad extra, to go outside. But we got scared. Father James Mallon talks about this in his book, Divine Renovation. We walked outside, we got scared, and then we said, how about instead of mission, I do ministry, which is ad intra, which serves inside the church. And that's what we've been doing ever since. Brothers and sisters, you and I have a mission. It's to lead holy lives so that we can be a blessing to our neighbors. One of my favorite passages is Jeremiah chapter 29. Jeremiah 29 is huge in the evangelical world because it's all about purpose. Because in Jeremiah 29, you have this famous line, "For I know the plans I have for you, plans for your welfare and not for your woe, for a future full of hope." And that's a line that people get, and they take that one verse and they they munch down on it and they love it and it's feel good. Yes, God has a plan for my life. But if you back that up into the wider thing of the actual chapter of Jeremiah 29, the Lord God is breaking open something even more ambitious. That God has a purpose for the city. See, Jeremiah 29 was the prophet writing a letter that God had commanded him to write to speak against false prophets who were living near the capital city of Babylon. See, all the Jews were carried off into exile out to Babylon. And they went to the shores of the river that runs along Babylon, and they just stopped. And they're like, we're not going to go into the city. We're going to stay out here and separate ourselves. The prophets, they had false prophets walking throughout the people saying, yes, never go in. The city is evil. The city is bad. The Lord God's going to deliver us any minute now. And then you have the letter from Jeremiah delivered by someone going out to the exiles. And the letter says this, go into the city. These people are false prophets. Don't listen to them. Go into the city and seek its prosperity. Marry and give away your children in marriage. Right? So he said, become a part of the city. Now, he's not saying adopt the culture of the city willy-nilly, right? We all know that there is evil aspects. Babylon is literally the Old and New Testament symbol for institutional political evil. And yet, here is the prophet Jeremiah saying, false prophets are saying, the Lord's going to deliver you soon. Hang out. Don't go in the city. He's saying, no, go in the city. Get married. Give your kids away in marriage. Do all that stuff. Build your name. Build your business. Build your household. And seek the prosperity of the city. Okay, so the reason why this is important is because God was saying, I have a plan for you in that city. Plan for your welfare and not for your woe, for a future full of hope for you as a people in that city. This isn't an individualistic prophecy. See, that's what we as individualists tend to do. But God is asking the Jewish people in exile, the temple was destroyed. They have no more priesthood, at least not there with them in Babylon. They can't worship the Lord with the temple sacrifices. They live by faith, not by sight. And yet, in the midst of all this, God's saying, I got a plan. I got a plan. I got a plan that's going to razzle and dazzle the nations. I got a plan that's going to change everything. But you have to have hope. You have to have hope, and you got to go into the city and seek its prosperity. So what do we do as lay people? Brothers and sisters, you are not there to be salesmen for Jesus, okay? I often have this image of people, and I think this is why we have a lot of anxiety about evangelization and mission, is we think we're supposed to walk up to a stranger and be like, okay, in 10 easy steps, how can I manipulate this conversation to be about Jesus? That's stupid. That's not the way to evangelize. There was a church that sent missionaries to Thailand. They had trained 2 different groups in 2 different schools of missionary practice, and they wanted to test these schools out. One was the zealous group of converters. That was their mission. They just wanted to go and convert people. So every conversation they had was intentional about leading people to a conviction of their own sin and their need for faith in the risen Lord. Okay? That's what we call proselytism, right? And that's what the church warns us against. You're not just there to yell at people to change their lives. In fact, that barely does anything. It doesn't do anybody any good. But the other group were going to take a totally different strategy. See, they were going to move into the communities and just be a blessing. Yeah, that's what they were going to do. They were going to go into these communities, and if kids couldn't read, they'd teach them how to read. They would set up planter gardens and feed people good food. They would donate money, donate time. They would just radiate God's blessing, right? Because Jesus Christ, though he was rich, became poor so that by his poverty we might become rich. So people literally live that out. They say, Jesus has given me all these graces of sonship. I'm going to go out and radiate the fatherhood of God to all these other people. I'm going to deny myself so that other people can live. This is what the world cannot explain. No system of capitalism, no appeal to communism can ever reach and altruism like Christianity, which calls for self-sacrificial generosity. Self-sacrificial generosity. You want to know what radiates the gospel? Being a blessing to others, even if it comes at a personal inconvenience to yourself. If you sacrifice so that others might live, so that others might find healing, guess what happens? You refute all the arguments of people against Christianity that have gone before. Because most Christians are totally satisfied being in their little holy huddles and ignoring the rest of the world. And this is the notion that we need to overcome. Just because you've been saved, just because you've received the grace of Christ into your life, you've been reborn by water and the Spirit, does not mean that you are finished here. Our mission is to make disciples of everyone. The lay people's job is to sanctify the temporal order. You want one sentence that satisfies the decree on the mission of the laity. It's this. Lay people, the non-ordained, are called to go out and sanctify the temporal order. Some people's principal job of sanctification will be through prayer, intercession, whatnot. Others will be just how they conduct themselves in work, at school, with their hobbies, other associations, in their neighborhood, in their homes. People need to see heroic acts of forgiveness, mercy, love, generosity, peace, joy, patience. That needs to radiate in a culture of disposable people and a disposable lifestyle. So what is Christ calling you and I to today? He is calling us to bless others, to be a sign of blessing, to be salt and light, to a people sitting in darkness, to radiate the love and blessing of Jesus Christ. Every time I do one of these small groups, I always have a session dedicated to evangelization. You know why? Because we are terrified to evangelize people. We're scared. But I think we can do it if we stop thinking we have to be a salesman, because that's a nerve-wracking, that's anxiety building, and realize that we just need to bless people. To bake a birthday cake for the elderly person who's been forgotten by their family, right? To do something small. To take people on trips to the grocery store that are less mobile. To love a child who doesn't have a parent in foster care. To pray with a mother contemplating abortion. To give her money so that she doesn't have to. To love the drug addict, the imprisoned. To clothe the naked, to feed the hungry, but not do it because we think, oh, look how good we are. To do it because we know what dignity they have and how this world has robbed them of that dignity and how we are here in Jesus' name to just bless them. Jesus commanded us to love our neighbor as ourselves. St. Paul would go on to say, regard other people's needs as more important than your own. So how do we do that in the church? It's simple. Self-sacrificial generosity. Be salt, be light. The role of the laity is to engage in a ministry of the word. That's our job. We're not here to be quasi-sacramental clerics. Our job is to engage in a ministry of the word, to preach the gospel to everyone. We can preach the gospel. We can be evangelists. You don't need to be ordained or in a religious order to evangelize. In fact, sometimes that's restrictive because they can't be employed at all your jobs and all your workplaces. They are not in your neighborhoods. They're in the rectories. You're there. You're there to be leaven, to be salt, to be light. Brothers and sisters, what's the role of the laity? Not to be quasi-clerics, but to sanctify, to make holy the temporal order by being a witness of what God has done in your life. You can radiate His self-sacrificial generosity to others through your own self-sacrificial generosity. Be a blessing. I would love to say, God bless you. But now I think it's time for you to bless God through your neighbor. Bye. I told you it was going to be preachy.